Gentlemen, welcome back to the shop. This is part 3 of my BendPak 10,000 pound asymmetric 2-post lift install. Part 1 was a shop requirements video. What you need to have, what requirements you need to have for your shop size and your concrete and things like that. And part number 2 was like a delivery and unboxing video. What you need to have on hand to be able to get this thing off the truck and get it uncrated. I'll put links to both of those down in the description. And with that, let's get started with the install.
So the first thing they want us to do is install the cables. And they actually make a note in the instructions if you have an asymmetric like I do. One cable is longer than the other. And I couldn't easily tell, so I actually laid them out here on the floor. So if you come down here and look, one is about 4 or 6 inches shorter than the other. So that one has to go on a particular side. I will figure out which one that is and I'll show you guys how to do it. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to slide this carriage up, get access to this 10mm bolt here. They want us to take this roller out, get the cable routed. I'm trying to see where this cable is going to attach to. Track your bolt, pin, move your roller. Alright guys, so these cables are getting the crimped end goes in the U-shaped piece inside the carriage assembly. There's no way that I could show you, physically point to it, but I'm sure you can see where it is. Depending on whether you use a narrow or wide, there's 2 crimped ends on the cable, and you're going to use the shorter one obviously for the narrow, the longer one for the wide. I'm going with the wide, so I'm using the longer one. You look down inside this column, I have this one already installed. Like I said, I've got the crimped end, the longer one in the U-shaped piece, locked in, and I put the roller back in the bottom. So we're going to tackle the hydraulics next. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the lines ran up to the top of the post. All we're basically doing is prepping this thing to be able to stand both of these things up. So you're getting the cables in, the hydraulic lines in, and then hopefully we should be able to stand it up. But where we're at right now, as you come underneath and look straight up, let me see if I can get it in the frame. There's a plug right there. That plug there, it's an Allen bolt. It has to come out and it gets a hydraulic fitting put in it. So if you follow the instructions as they're written, they have you put this fitting into a port here on the bottom of the cylinder. Well, they have you do that before they have you put the hoses in. Well, if you put the fitting into the port, you can't slide the carriage up to be able to get the hose into the clips. Ask me how I found that out. Obviously, I took everything all back apart, and I'm going to do it this way just because I don't want to tear up a hydraulic hose. This is what's going to get threaded into the bottom of that hydraulic cylinder. It came pre-Teflon taped. So thread sealer's already on it, Teflon tape. Should just thread it in, and then I'll show you guys the next step. Alright, so this is the power side post. The hydraulic line coming from the cylinder, it's going to be probably like a 6-foot hose. It'll be pretty easy to figure out which one it is. It's not the real long one, but it's not the real short one. It's going to come up to a T right next to that can of WD-40. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this. The 90 degree goes on the T that connects to this line going to the cylinder. This is your supply line coming from the power unit. I am going to get this routed, and then I'll bring you guys back. So they have you route the hose up the column, and as you go, let me get a flashlight here. You have these clips. So what I'm going to do is I'm putting the hose obviously through the clips, but I'm going to actually squeeze that clip a little bit to try and hold the hose in. They say in the instructions, if you have any spots that appear as though they're going to cause interference, to secure it with zip ties. Where you're going to zip tie to, I got no idea, but maybe they're talking about a different section of lift. I'm not really sure. Alright, so this is the hose hookup for the power unit side. This big hose here is coming from the power unit. Your fluid is then going to tee off and go down to this cylinder here, to the fitting in the bottom that we'd already installed. And then if you're using the wide configuration, you have to put this small, like 13 or 12 inch extension piece in here, because with the column width being wider, obviously you need longer hoses. The other column is going to be pretty much the same deal as this one, only you're only going to have one hose. You aren't going to have any T-fitting. Basically, you're going to hook a hose up to the bottom of the other cylinder and basically coil that hose up until we get the column stood up, and then it's going to go to that far end of that small 12 or 13 inch extension. And that's really it for the hydraulics. They're about as simple as they get for this thing. Okay guys, we're going to stop right here a minute. I screwed up. I got much further along in the install and realized this section that I just showed you is wrong. And unfortunately, the magic of editing can't take me back and fix where I am, because the columns are up, the hydraulics are ran. It's a little hard to go back at this point. Let me take you over here and show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is how the T-fitting is supposed to look. If you guys notice, I had the T on the inside of the column with the supply hose on the inside of the column. Well, like I said, I got much further along and realized that this hole here is for the over travel limit up top, and this is where the cable goes through. Well, if you go back and watch the other section of the video I just showed you, I had the hydraulic hose through that hole. That isn't how it's supposed to be. So what you're going to do, the other side of your T goes through the hole in the column, and your supply hose comes down to the power unit. When it comes to the hydraulic hoses, this picture here is the only one that they give you as far as the way the hoses are supposed to be laid out, and this picture here. So nowhere in the instructions do they bother to tell you how this fitting here is supposed to go through the column and then down to the power unit. So I don't really feel that bad about screwing it up, but it could have been a little bit more clearly labeled or brought up. Let's put it that way. Alright, so before we stand our columns up, there's one other thing that we need to take care of, and that is this top gantry. I'm using the wide configuration, so it comes shipped in the narrow, so we need to move it out to the wide, and all that's a matter of just moving this bolt to this hole, and there's a similar bolt on the other side that needs moved as well. There's two set screws down here on the bottom that hold the over travel rod. Just loosen the set screws and then slide the rod inside the holder. Pretty standard, pretty straightforward. So where we're at is
I've taken you through how to set up one of these columns and basically get it prepped to be able to stand it up. One thing I think I left out was the hydraulic hose going to the hydraulic cylinder on the bottom side for the lift. The 90-degree fitting goes on the cylinder end, and then the straight end goes into the T, which the T ties back into the power unit. The procedure for this is pretty much the same as the other side. I'm not going to record the whole thing because it's the column that I recorded and did was much more complex than this one. This one's literally just getting one length of hose that is going to tie into that T eventually. So I'm going to hook up this hose to that cylinder, loop it all up, and then we're pretty much at the point where we're going to stand these columns up. It's not going to be today, probably be tomorrow, but you guys won't know the difference. I got to acquire some people and acquire a rotary hammer drill to drill my floor. I got leads on both, but we'll see what people's schedules are and stuff like that, so this may sit for a couple days. Alright, so I want to bring you guys up to speed as far as where we're at after I left you guys. I took all of my equalizing cables, routed them up top or inside the column, just coiled them up, get them out of the way so we can stand these up. I did the same thing with the hydraulic hose on both columns. I also put the column on, you know, the side it was supposed to be on. They were flip-flopped when they were on the skid originally. Like I showed you guys earlier, I widened that out. And I also laid this out on the floor over here with a couple chalk lines. I'm probably going to redo it in Sharpie so I don't end up wiping it off. But that way I have a reference point of how these things are supposed to be set and where they need to be and all that. Here's a shot of that. Like I said, I'm going to go over it with Sharpie just because I'm afraid when we walk the post into place that something's going to get wiped off and you aren't going to be able to see anything correctly. One thing I am going to do off camera is I'm probably going to move where my cinder blocks are. This one down here on the end, if I move it up toward the top of the post, it makes, in the picture it would be the left side over here, it makes the left side easier to raise and lower because of the weight down on the bottom down here. So I'm going to do that. We'll see how it goes. I've got 2 other people coming over and I've got more on standby, so we'll see what happens. As far as drilling the floor, you're going to need something like this. It's a rotary hammer drill, a regular 1/2-inch chuck, 18 volt, DeWalt or Milwaukee probably isn't going to cut it. You're going to need something like this. Trying to drill a 3/4 inch hole. One thing I did look at was I made sure that the bit I bought was rated for some sort of rebar use because I know that there is rebar in the floor. I'm not sure how well it's going to drill if I hit any. I'm hoping I don't hit any rebar, but we'll find out. Is it going to clear that from this base? We may have to close the door, but it's outside the track, so I think we'll be fine.
I would guess, I would say it's fine.
Okay.
Do you have 4 of these things though?
2.
Confused on how it works.
It's
I'll see it.
keep going. Let's spin it. Just get it up first. Piece of cake. I wanted it. Of course, you get all the work in it.
There's definitely bottom heavy.
Where's the cut?
Is this it right here?
Yeah, but which these cuts or those cuts? I don't. Which
This is it.
this? Okay, so this edge right here, it's gonna sit. Ready? It's gonna sit like this, just like this. So this outside edge is gonna be right here. Which way we going?
So deep you gotta spin it.
Yeah. It's like 180.
Too easy. This one's on soap.
Yeah.
That's
Damn, real close, isn't it?
Okay. I usually get this on hold. Watch, you're gonna hit it with
a ladder's coming.
I know. Do you need somebody to hold the ladder?
I think I'm alright.
You need more towards me?
I got
Because
it.
I'm pretty good.
Just try not to drop it on me, that'd be great.
Told you need my hard hat.
I should hold something. I don't know.
Do anything?
You're close. Just the back is catching. This back corner is catching. Just the hair. Probably a couple more hits.
Is it moving in the right direction is the
Yes.
question.
Yes. Yep.
There,
There it is. There it is. Nice.
that was easy. With 3 guys, I tell you, I wouldn't want to do it with 2.
So one thing I missed, I just snugged these bolts up. One thing that I missed is the truck adapter, basically storage. Looks like it goes through the lags, so I got to pull these nuts off and resecure it with the same nuts that I'm using. All right, as you guys saw, we kind of took a unorthodox method of getting everything lined up and assembling everything. We thought about, lagging everything down to the floor and then putting, the top gantry on. But we thought about it and it's like, what if this is wrong? And then you're going to have to drill another set of holes. Then you're going to have a mess on your hands. The floor is going to look like Swiss cheese. So we very, very gingerly raised the gantry up with the columns unbolted.
and set it on top. Obviously, when we went to set it up there, it didn't quite line up, or we had to do some tweaking on the columns. Now, had you put the lags in at that point, you're kind of screwed. I don't know any good way of really fixing that issue. I guess you would really have to shim it, but the issue with shimming it that much is it's not even going to be close to level. So that isn't the way we did it. Isn't how the instructions say to do it, but that's how we got it done. Nobody died, nothing fell over, so I guess it didn't go nearly as bad as it could have. So the instructions say to torque the lags down to 3 to 5 turns. Yeah, it's pretty vague. I do remember reading in an old version of the instructions for this lift that they recommended. I want to say 80 foot-pounds. 3 to 5 turns just seems very, very vague for something that I wouldn't say it's super, super critical, but I mean, you want it to be tight. So I'm going to go with 80, 85-ish, somewhere in there. I think if you go much higher than that, I mean, yeah, the fastener will handle that much torque, but the question is the concrete. So at what point will the concrete start to crack? And I don't want to find out what that point is. And like I said, I remember 80 for some reason just sticks out in my mind. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and go in like a crisscross pattern. So from here over to the opposite side, and then opposite side to here, and then this fastener here, and then this. Basically you want to get this thing all torqued down equally on all sides. I don't know how critical the torque sequence is on this, but I'm used to working on cars where that kind of stuff is fairly critical. So old habits die hard, as they say. So that's what I'm going to do here. And then your extension sitting there like that. Shimming. Fortunately, in my case, like I told you guys in the requirements video earlier on, my floor is in good shape. It's only like 6 months old. I didn't really need any shims. I used them on this post over here on the one corner. As far as when you would put them in if you needed them, the best time in my situation, because I put the gantry on first, I would lay the gantry on, and then probably before you drill the floor. Just before you drill the floor, you'll be able to get it close to level. And it's obviously, when you torque everything down, it's going to change slightly. That's just the nature of what you're doing. You can't torque something down and then expect to put a shim underneath between the floor and the bottom of the post, basically. But yeah, like I said, I didn't really need them in my case. I think I used 2. They gave the pack, it looks like there's probably close to 20 of them in there. And if you need 20 of them, either you got some serious slope in your floor, or your floor's jacked up and you should probably consider just pouring a new pad at that point and getting a nice level surface to start with, because 20 shims. I mean, I can show you the package. There's a lot of them here. So I've got all these, plus this unopened bundle here that I never used. But so they give you plenty if you need them, but luckily I didn't. All right, the next steps I'm gonna kind of struggle with because I have no way of getting a camera, 10, 12 feet in the air. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna run you through real quick what I'm gonna do. This cable here, I'm gonna run up the column, through the roller, up across the top, and down. The cable on the opposite side that I said I'm gonna run over here, let me pull this cable out of the way, is gonna get threaded into, well, it's gonna slide into that hole, and there's gonna be a nut on the bottom side, just like this. That's going to go through that hole on the other cable. I'm going to do the same thing with this cable. It's going to go up, it's going to go across, and it's going to come down and end up in that hole there. After I get that done, I'm going to take this coiled up hydraulic line up top. It's kind of hard to see with the light there. I'm going to take that and run it across the top of the gantry, and then it's going to come down, and you're going to tie it into those clips along the way, and it's going to go into the top of that T basically, and that's going to be the supply for the hydraulic cylinder on the opposite side. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that because, well, I can't try to do something like that 12 feet in the air with one hand holding a camera and trying to talk at the same time. So I'll bring you guys back when that's done. Hopefully that kind of lays out what you need to do clear enough for you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave stuff in the comments as far as anything you need cleared up or stuff like that. I'll try and help you out as best I can. All right, guys, I ran into a bit of a situation trying to put the equalizing cables on either side of the lift. The one side went on fine with no issue. I got it from this side all the way draped over the top and into the holder on this carriage. This cable here, when I went to take it up and across, came out of the U-shaped piece that's inside the carriage. I already have all my hydraulic lines hooked up, so all I did was I took a little bit of shop air and hooked shop air to my basically my hydraulic input for my power unit and gave it a little shot of air. That'll raise the both carriages, and then that way you can, I propped, put 4x4 or whatever you need to do underneath it. That way you can have access to the bottom side of that column, because otherwise you have no way of getting to it. The only way that you'd be able to get to it without raising the carriage up is reaching all the way down through the top of the carriage and all the way down here to the bottom where it came out, which nobody's arms are that long, so that's the way I did it. So that's it. That's going to be really the only way to do that, unless you just manhandle both carriages up. To me, that's a heck of a lot easier than trying to kill yourself lifting those things. Alright, so this is the next day, obviously, after I showed you guys how to air this thing up. I came out here today after I got home from work, and there's a puddle of oil on the floor, so any of you guys that are worried about, oh, you shouldn't air that thing up because there's no oil in it, you're gonna, destroy those seals running them dry like that. Well, it's obviously already been tested before it was shipped. There's obviously some residual oil still in the cylinder. I really highly doubt that you're going to hurt anything by doing that a few times. Obviously, if you're going to run it like that permanently, it may be a different story, but you know, just running up and down with some air to get that cable reattached, not going to be a big deal. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get our wiring ran for our over travel limit. The wiring for the over travel comes through this hole with rubber grommet. It's going to go up inside the column, feed some of that in, and it's going to run straight up, and basically I'm just going to drape it onto the over travel limit switch, and I'm going to let it hang there for the time being. I'm going to wire it up there. I will show you how I wired it up down here on the ground, because going up a 10-foot step ladder with the camera in one hand and the screwdriver in the other doesn't usually work out that well for me. All right, guys, I wanted to show you this too regarding the overhead switch. So your incoming power here, you have 10-2 copper on a 30 amp breaker, okay? You may have 8-2 depending on how long your run is from your panel to your lift, but you get the idea. But what's interesting to me is this wire here that they give you as part of that cable that I just showed you that I ran up the column. It's 14. It's not 10, it's 14. It's also 14 coming back to the power unit. That to me is a kind of a safety hazard in my mind, but I'm kind of intrigued as far as how much actual amperage this thing is going to draw once I get it running. So I may have to come back at a later date. I mean, if this thing's pulling, you know, anything over 15 amps, obviously, I'm going to have to change this wire out to like a, you know, obviously a 10 gauge if it's pulling over, you know, 20, 25 amps. I can show you over here on the cable. You have a 14 gauge copper conductor with 10 gauge feeding it. That's the definition of chintzy. Whether or not it's going to be a fire hazard, that remains to be seen, but if that breaker ever needs to trip, it's very well possible that it may burn to some degree before that breaker trips. How much, I don't know, but like I said, I want to see, once I get this thing going, what the actual amperage draw is, because this is very, very interesting to me that they would do this. All right, so this is the bottom of the limit switch once you get it mounted. There's your cable coming up through the bottom. There's a cover plate. Let me see if I can find it. I laid it up top here. Okay. So this cover plate ends up just like this. It's got a hole. You can see right there. It has a screw, a little tech screw or something that goes through it. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to that. Like I said, it's kind of chintzy. I would just keep an eye on it when you're bringing a car up and down, but I mean, it does the job, but we'll see. So I just finished the safety mechanism. I just want to give you guys kind of an overview of what it's supposed to look like when you're done. You got a return spring here that makes it spring forward. Obviously, this is actually what engages your lock. So ultimately, this right here is what's holding up the vehicle. So the cable comes through here, through a hole in this bolt, and then it is locked down with two washers that you basically just crank together to hold that in place. The cable goes to the lock mechanism on the other side, so when I move this side, the other side moves in unison. The cable itself, you come around to the inside here, you can see there's a roller there. There's a roller there up top. It then runs up across the overhead. And then finally to another roller down here on this side. This side over here, it actually has a loop here. So the loop just goes over the stud, and then it has 2 return springs on either side. Are you prepared?
You want me to put the bolts? Well, you're gonna hold this up and I'm gonna thread the bolts on.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna be able to hold it up for that long?
I don't know. How long are you going to take?
I'm gonna try to do it as fast as I can. Go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is like, you can't lift it up anymore. Okay, that's better, thank you. Okay. Just 3 or 4 turns, you said.
Yeah, that's about all you're going to get out of them.
One more. Up a little bit more. Down a little bit. No, they're not trying to be perfect, but it's hard. There's a little bit left.
Not easy being Abby.
No. Okay. I think you're on there.
Woo! Okay.
It's holding, so I must have done good.
As it hits my toe.
Is there a torque spec for this?
None specified.
It's a good question. I bet they were wondering.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's important.
People, some people take that stuff way too seriously.
Torque spec?
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell me, tell the camera.
You were talking to me. All right, gentlemen. So we're on to the last hydraulic fitting here. This one here has an O-ring on it, and this end is flared. The O-ring end will seat into the pump, like so. Just tighten it. I usually tighten it till you get it in the right, correct orientation, and then run in your lock nut. Before you can route your hydraulic hose, you need to get your cover plate, and there's 2 tabs inside that the hose actually goes through when it sits up in here like this. So I'm going to route that. There's also a grommet that comes with the hardware that needs to go through this hole for the cable going up to the safety switch. See what size is. Sweet. The arms themselves are marked left and right. You mind handing me that pin?
Where?
That big friggin' pin. Thank you. So the arms are marked left and right on the teeth. The short ones go in the front. Can you drop that through? There you go. There you go. So that arm's on. There is a large E-clip that goes on the bottom, but you guys can see what I mean about the arms swinging or not swinging. The bolts obviously need tightened on this one. And I'll do that now before I forget. Got it? Got two more. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
And one more. Okay, that one's in. Alright guys, that takes care of the major assembly process. I've got one more cover I have to put on this driver's side post just for the safety mechanism, just to cover it up. It's just two Phillips bolts. It's Phillips screws, just like Phillips screws that we use over here on this side. The bracket is, or the cover is a little bit different. It doesn't have the loops in it for the hydraulic hose or anything. It's just, you know, basically the C channel. I'm probably gonna speed this up on a time lapse or something because the arms, you know, once you do one, it's kind of like doing them all. So it sort of took me a minute to try and decipher what they meant by this, but so these arms are marked right and left. And when I initially thought that, I thought this meant this arm goes on the left column and this arm over here would go on the right column. That isn't the case. The way they want you to do this is there's one short arm marked left. There's one short arm marked right. So what they want you to do is come back, take a look at the front, the open section of the column, so the middle of the column. The one that's marked left goes on the left side of the open section of the column. The one on the right goes on the right side of the open section of the column. I thought, you know, left was driver's side, right was passenger side. I put one on and realized my mistake and had to take it off and, you know, take care of it. So there are a couple E-clips that go into this groove here. Right there. And right there. That just keeps the pins from pulling up and out of the carriage. So with that, that's all I've got for tonight. What I'm going to do is bring you guys back when I throw some hydraulic oil in this. I'm probably going to use automatic transmission fluid rather than hydraulic oil, simply because it is dyed red and not, you know, that golden motor oil looking color. And if I have a leak, it'll be easier to see with a red dye than it would gold. As far as my electrical onto the column, I ran my number 10 up to basically an outlet up in my ceiling that I installed a 30 amp twist lock plug into, and then I bought bulk extension cord and came all the way down the side. I ran it underneath the cover for the safety lock in the loop with the hydraulic hose, the pressure hose, going out to the T and then down to the power unit. So here is my cable. I kind of went ahead and took some of this apart just so I knew what was inside and where I was going to go with this. But there's a screw here, the cover comes off. I just let it hang by the wire. Inside there's a relay. Anybody that's familiar with industrial automation, let's say, has seen a relay like this. You guys in automotive Probably not. It's literally just, it's the exact same thing as an automotive relay. It works the exact same way, only you have 3 sets of contacts here that when the coil pulls it pulls in all 3 sets of contacts. Obviously, if you're using 3-phase, you're going to use all 3 contacts. I'm single phase, so I only use 2. I kind of made the decision. I was thinking about this this wire going up to the safety switch. Long story short, I don't trust it. When you're raising a car that's, you know, potentially $50,000, $60,000, especially when you get into a larger truck, you're going to trust your vehicle to what amounts to a cheap Chinese safety switch. If you guys want to hook it up, there are schematics in the instructions on how to hook it up. It's pretty simple. I think the reason they tell you to use such large cable going to this thing is they're mostly used in industrial buildings. Not a lot of home guys like myself are putting these things in. So the runs in an industrial building are much, much longer than what they would be in a house or, you know, a small shop or things like that. So I think it's just a case of BendPak covering their butt. They don't want you, you know, running into a high voltage drop situation and cooking your motor. That's honestly the only conclusion that I can come to that makes any sort of sense at all. As far as it being a safety issue, I couldn't really comment on that. I don't know. It's definitely not right in my mind, but obviously it's working because this isn't the first one they've ever sold, and I'm sure it won't be the last. Okay, so depending on how you wire it in the ceiling, which you should wire it black as power, white as power, green as ground, your black and your white are going to land here and here. Your green is going to go up to the grounding hole and secured with a screw. So the relay sits on a track down the bottom. And the cord's going to be in the way. Pull this cord back just a hair. Make sure my button wires aren't getting pinched. There it is. So I just topped this thing off, put about 3.5 gallons, just over 3.5 gallons of hydraulic oil in it. My cylinders are partially extended, so there's going to be some air in there, I know that for sure. So hit the button and see what happens, I guess. Scared me.
I don't.
I got a leak over there.
That's where we heard the hissing yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah, something's going on here. Air is actually coming out of, sounds like the top of the cylinder. But I may be wrong. And then it just stopped completely, all of a sudden. Very strange. All right, let's lower it down to lock. Cool. So last night I didn't record it, but I bled out the hydraulic cylinders and went to sleep, went to work, came home today, and I equalized the cables from side to side. So when I raise it, you get one clunk. You know, you don't hear a clunk clunk like it was earlier. That's how it's supposed to be. As far as bleeding the hydraulics, what I did was I raised the arms on the lift. I did not lower them onto the locks. I then cracked, there's a bolt on top, I'll give you guys a close-up view of it, on top of the lift cylinders. And it's just a little Allen bolt, and you loosen an Allen bolt and you wait for all the air to purge out until you start seeing hydraulic oil or automatic transmission fluid, depending on what you used. Lock it back shut. That's about all there is to it. It dribbles all the way down to the bottom of the floor, you know, all the way down the cylinder to the floor. So the outside of the cylinder is kind of coated in oil now, so it may look as though it has a slow leak, but I checked the fittings and I checked the dust seal and everything on the end. I don't see any coming out. I think it's just residual dripping down from bleeding it. I wiped it out of there this morning and there's nothing left in there. I left it on hydraulic pressure with nothing on the lift, obviously, all day long. No leaks. So I'll zoom in and show you guys exactly where the bleed port is on each cylinder and how I adjusted out the cables. Alright, so as this thing was going up, this is the passenger side column. You could hear it hit the lock after the one on the driver's side, so I threaded the nut upward to make it hit the lock sooner, and now it is even with the driver's side. As far as the bleed screw, that is the bleed screw up on top. So have a rag handy when you do this, otherwise you'll end up with fluid all dribbling down the sides of your cylinder like I did. And I wouldn't say make a giant mess, but be a giant annoyance, let's put it that way, because there's no way to get down inside to clean out the residual that leaked all the way down the cylinder to the bottom. Okay guys, that's it. That's the entire install. I have not actually put a car on the lift yet.
my girlfriend is not home. I'm sure she's going to want to be home to see it. Otherwise, if I don't, you know how it is, I'm going to hear about it. So I'm waiting for her to come home. In the meantime, I'm going to clean up. And like I said, that's it. I would estimate that I would have close to, it would be around 18 hours probably in this install. So today is Wednesday. I received it Friday. I worked every day except for Friday, 7 to 3 at my regular job, and then I came home and worked on it at night every night. The only day that I did not work was the day it was delivered. That was Friday. And that day I quit working by 7 o'clock because 7 or 8 o'clock because I didn't have anybody to help me put the columns up. So, and granted as well, I was doing it by myself. So if you have help, it may go quicker. If you have help available when you get it, it may go quicker. But there's not a whole lot to it, guys, to be totally honest with you. It's just being able to decipher the directions, as I showed you earlier, like with the hydraulic hose and the inside the column and stuff like that. I would say the directions are a good guideline, but I like to hope I did a better job than what the directions did, but ultimately that's up to you guys to decide. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back probably in like 2 or 3 months, and I'm going to do a review video kind of after I get some use out of this thing, what my thoughts are, haven't had any issues with it, blah, blah, blah. And probably in 3 or 4 months, I'm going to change the hydraulic oil. There's a tag actually on the power unit that they want you to change it after a week, after it's as like a break-in. That would be true if I was using this every day, but I'm not going to use it every day. I mean, I'm a homeowner. This is not my full-time job, is fixing cars. So I have this mainly as my hobby, and like I told you earlier, a little bit of money on the side. Well, I don't do a ton of work, so I'm going to wait 3 or 4 months and change the oil. As far as how you have to change the oil, it looks like you're going to need some sort of oil extractor or siphon it, because there is no drain plug on the reservoir itself. Kind of sucks, but nothing you're going to do about it. So I'm going to put links in the description to BendPak's website and some retailer websites, and just to like my shop crane and some lifting straps and stuff that you may not have that isn't like general hand tools to put this thing together. There is a dealer locator on BendPak's website if you guys want to go through a dealer and have somebody install it and just go that route. There's nothing wrong with that. They do have a dealer locator on the website, so you just type in your zip code and you'll get a listing of whoever they show as a dealer close by. Thanks for watching, guys. Look for more content from me, and if you like this video, hit like. If you don't, hit dislike. Tell us why. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.